August 8th meeting of the City Commission to order. Second on the agenda is consider approval of the minutes from the regular meeting held on July 25th, 2019. Are there any additions, changes, corrections?
None.
Hearing none, they're approved as presented. Next item is citizen comments. I want to thank everyone that's joined us in chambers and those that are watching us at home. This is your part of the agenda. If you have an item you'd like to bring to our attention that's not on tonight's agenda, please come forward now. Next is consent agenda. These are items to be approved by the commission in one motion. These are appointments. First, an appointment to the Hayes Housing Authority Board for a 4-year term, Audra Brungart. The second is a reappointment to the Hayes Recreation Commission Board, Nancy Jeter. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda items.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries 5-0. No unfinished business. Now we're going to move on to International Residential Building Code Amendments. Approve ordinance number 3965, amending Chapter 11 of the City of Hayes, Kansas Municipal Code.
Good evening, Jesse Rohr, Director of Public Works. Two different codes we're going to talk about tonight, that being the residential code and the electrical code, for a couple possible amendments. First one will be the 2015 International Residential Code, or IRC, and the second will be the 2014 National Electric Code, or the NEC. I'm going to talk about a couple of different code provisions in each one. First, I want to jump through the NEC and talk about a couple code amendments that we're proposing. A little bit of background. We've had the current code adopted for just over 2 years. They went into effect July 1 of 2017, which at that time, City updated all our building codes, electrical codes, fire codes, plumbing codes. A meeting was held on June 4th of 2019, just a couple months ago, between electrical contractors and inspection staff to discuss certain sections of the adopted codes and their implications. There were a couple of concerns brought forward, and staff at this time agrees with those. And of those, there are two main topics. First being arc fault circuit interrupters, or AFCIs. An AFCI device protects against electrical-related arcs, which commonly and can lead to fires. This can be an arc within a wiring system of an arc, or an arc from a device, such as a lamp plugged into an electrical circuit. Anytime an arc is detected, the arc fault, or the AFCI, trips, therefore cutting power to the receptacle or circuit and hopefully eliminating a potential fire hazard. Whereas ground fault circuit interrupters, or GFCIs, which most of us are familiar with, we have them in our homes, they actually protect people from shock hazards, and arc faults, or AFCIs, protect against fire hazards that may be present in an arcing situation. The rooms identified on with the green dots here on the image are required to have arc fault protection by code. For a new construction home, this is simple for an electrician to install. There's no issues with this. When performing electrical changes in existing homes, however, that's when things can get challenging. So here, just a little simple image, show you how a couple instances of how an arc can happen. A pinch cord, such as where you see the chair on the cord. The other option would be putting a screw or a nail into a wall, and you might catch the wire in the wall. It might function fine, you might not know it's happening, but that situation can create an arc and can and has led to fires in some situations. Here's a couple images. On the left is a arc fault receptacle, and on the right is an arc fault breaker. Receptacles can start at about $22 compared to about $1.20 for a non-arc fault receptacle. The breaker there on the right, they start at about $30 and can range between $30 and $75 for certain brands. A regular breaker, non-arc fault type, can be as cheap as $4. So why are we asking for amendments on the arc fault? So there's 3 or 4 different reasons. Probably one of the most important ones is that existing wiring, existing homes, and the wiring methods and the panels, the breaker panels, are not configured to work with new arc fault breaker devices. Some manufacturers, you can't buy them in some cases. The second important reason is that existing and older circuits, the way the wiring is installed in an older home, may not be conducive to the new devices and codes. When they wire homes today, in almost all cases, they're wired much differently than they were wired 30, 40, 50 years ago and beyond. I already talked about the cost of the material, but also the labor costs, much more excessive than the devices themselves. Labor costs can get into the thousands of dollars when having to modify a circuit to make it arc fault protected. These proposed amendments will accomplish what the contractors and staff support and have discussed. Less expensive installation is one of the reasons why. It also allows electricians to do minor maintenance or repair with minimal cost to the property owner. This also gives flexibility to staff, the proposed changes, in making determination on existing systems on whether an upgrade is needed or not. There's two main changes here on your screen that we're asking for or proposing. One being allowing a modified or extended circuit without it being arc fault protected. The other is to allow an existing receptacle to be changed out without it being replaced with an arc fault protected device. Current code, if a standard receptacle is being changed, current code would require it to be arc fault protected. And that's being changed for any reason. If you want to change it because it's broken, if you want to change it because you want a different color, it has to be arc fault protected. Simple change out, however, the cost can be quite high. Before I move on to smoke alarms, does anyone have a question on arc fault devices?
Just to clarify, you may have already said this, but it's my understanding, again, it's something as simple as changing out one receptacle in the house under the way our code today, you'd have to do a significant amount of rewiring.
In many cases, right. And you know, like I say, change by current code, if you change out a receptacle, although a permit isn't required, there's no permit required to change a receptacle, right, but it's still city code.
Right.
And whether it's a homeowner changes that receptacle or an electrical contractor changes that receptacle, by code, by adopted code, it's required to be an arc fault device. It doesn't matter the age of the home, it doesn't matter the type of wiring system, and because of the wiring methods, sometimes you put that arc fault receptacle in there, it's going to trip.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing in existing dwellings, and therefore requiring the wiring, and that's where the cost really escalates, is when they have to rewire that circuit or more of them.
Also, the percentage of homes that were built, as I was telling the city manager, we moved into a home in 1977 that had GCFI just in the wet areas. But I imagine most of the homes in Hayes built before 1980 had nothing like that. And that's a vast percentage of the housing stock here.
Correct.
So this would be impossible to enforce.
I don't even know how to ask my question. If I change it out in my home, where will it ever come into play? I'm not going to get a permit. When will it ever come into play that I've done something outside code?
Probably when there's an incident. If just a scenario that comes to mind is if there is a fire in your home or someone's home, and insurance company or fire marshal comes in to investigate and realize it was an electrical issue, and they further investigate and realize that maybe receptacles were changed out and not changed out to arc fault devices, and it's required by code, they may decline any claims and not cover anything.
To see if they could ever figure that out, though. I don't know how they would figure that out.
It
Really?
happened in a facility not in the city limits where it was a fire.
Interesting.
Jesse, last week, I think Commissioner Millick said this, there's some houses just aren't compatible with their wiring. Where does that age range of houses start that wouldn't be compatible, or do you even know that?
Oh, gosh, Commissioner Swallows threw out the 1980, that might be as close a guess as I can make. That's probably a fairly accurate timeline. I have a home that was built pre-1950, and it was wired in a method that would be very tough to make arc fault protection without completely rewiring.
Jesse, we all got a letter from Mr. Holland this weekend, or this week, and he was talking about there was 3 different options for this. Do you know what those options are? He did not really explain them. He just said there was 3.
Right. So, so Brian Holland, he's with the National Electrical Manufacturers Association. In some way, he caught wind that we're proposing some changes here. So he contacted myself, and I think all you were copied on it. And of course, they're in the electrical. They supply electrical devices. They're in manufacturing supply of those. And he's had a great email, lots of information. And so he talked about three options. One being, let me turn my page here. One is doing a arc fault receptacle. One is doing an arc fault breaker. And then the third is making sure if you change your receptacle, that circuit is protected by arc fault in some other method. So that receptacle might not have to be replaced with an arc fault device, but somewhere in the line in that circuit, that circuit would have to be protected. And that's where it gets a little complicated and tough, especially in existing homes where usually there's not a lot of ways to tell how a home is wired, where circuits run. And so he also mentioned 2 exceptions. Those exceptions are not found in the 2014 NEC that we have, but they are in the 2017 NEC that we have not adopted. Those exceptions do back off the requirements for arc faults slightly. We're going just a step further, allowing modifications and extensions of electrical circuits without requiring arc fault. Don't quite go to that extent, but they have realized that in the 2014 NEC, there are some things in there that aren't compatible. So one of the exceptions actually states that you don't have to do it if a listed combination type arc fault circuit interrupter or circuit breaker is not commercially available, which is one of the things we're trying to do, that if a panel's not compatible, you can't buy the device, then you don't have to do it. And then another exception is if a arc fault receptacle is not commercially available. So again, depending on the situation, the NEC, I think they're starting to realize these issues, and that's part of the problem we see a lot of times codes are ahead of industry. We see that not only in electrical code, but plumbing code, building code, where building code puts things in there and you can't buy the products to do what the code asks you to do. So.
Thank you, Jesse, because
Mhm.
it was very confusing. So, and
It all kind of is.
Just sending us and telling us that there's these options, but not really telling us what the options were. That's why I wanted you to try to explain that to us.
In every code cycle for about the last 10 years, the arc fault circuit requirements have expanded. And I think we'll continue to see that. The NEC codes come out every 3 years. And like I say, we have the 2014 adopted. 17 was mentioned in the email from Brian Holland. I haven't looked at the 2020 code yet, but I'm sure there's more changes to arc fault then. And like I say, they continue to expand and evolve. And hopefully you get to the point where we don't have the issues and we can address these easier without having to make amendments to the code.
So Jesse, you brought up so what happens, and I'm for amending this code, but in a few years they quit making the old parts. I mean, what does that do? I mean, and maybe.
That's a possibility. I mean, it's kind of like tamper-resistant receptacles. There's probably going to be a time where, code now requires tamper-resistant
Right.
receptacles, and they're almost easier to find than non-tamper-resistant. But there's probably going to be a point in time where everything is arc protected, tamper protected, ground fault protected. The code is going that way cycle after cycle of the new code. So.
That would just be very expensive for a community. I mean,
Right, and like I say, new construction, it's easy. The
Yeah.
contractors haven't, it's not new construction they're talking about, but
Yeah.
going into those older homes, it's tough.
That's interesting. Thank you.
So the second change I want to talk about is smoke alarms. So we have two main issues with smoke alarms. One is placement, and again, this is existing construction. So one is placement of smoke alarms during remodels, and the second is interconnection of those smoke alarms that are placed. And within this, we also talked about carbon monoxide alarms are also included. So as most people know, code for decades has required smoke alarms in bedrooms and outside of bedrooms and on all levels of a home. So a 3-level home, you're going to have one on each level, you're going to have one in every bedroom and immediately outside of each bedroom. New construction, not an issue, but the current 2015 International Residential Code states that where alterations, repairs, or additions requiring a permit occur, smoke alarms shall be installed as required for new construction. So someone who's going to pull a permit to remodel a kitchen or do a utility room addition or an addition to a garage, once they pull that permit, that 2015 code says that entire home will now be updated. Their smoke alarm system will be updated just as if it were new construction. In most remodel situations, this code has been problematic due to access for interconnection of those smoke alarms, and often requires extensive fishing of wires through walls and ceilings and attics and try to access those hard-to-reach areas. Again, we talked about cost on the arc fault devices. Again, we're talking about extensive cost to wire these smoke alarms the way code requires it. So the amendment that we're asking for on smoke alarms, there's a couple parts to it. 314.2.2 and 315.2.2 deal with smoke alarm placement and carbon monoxide alarm placement. So rather than requiring it in the entire house when a project a permit for a project is issued, it actually is worded to state that where one or more sleeping rooms are added in a dwelling, that sleeping room and the area immediately outside the sleeping room would have smoke alarms installed. The rest of the home, if the homeowner chooses to, can remain as is. So the remodel would not affect other areas of the home. The current code states that where any alteration, repair, or addition, the smoke alarms will be installed. So we've dwindled that down to just the bedroom areas. One other thing that Mr. Holland shared was the option of battery smoke detectors. We're aware of that option. The electrical contractors are aware of that option. However, the interconnection is still required even with battery type. So it's not your standard $4 battery smoke detector, but it's the $40 Bluetooth compatible smoke detector to be installed. And according to the electrical contractors and the things we're seeing out there, those devices just aren't quite there yet.
I have them, they don't.
They don't function as well as the hardwired devices, where we hardwire one smoke detector to another. Like I say, I think they're getting there, but it's another where I think the code is a little bit ahead of the industry. So the second part of the proposed change is the interconnection of them, and we are asking that the code be amended to read that unless removal of interior wall and ceiling finishes are removed, the interconnection won't be required, except, like say, in those bedroom instances. So, if you're removing all the sheetrock in your basement, exposing everything, exposing all the wiring, it's simple to install the smoke detectors and interconnect those on that level, then code would require it. But if you're not doing that, it would not require interconnection, therefore not require the fishing of the wires through the walls and trying to get those interconnected. So options you would have tonight is make amendments as proposed. You can make no amendments, or you could amend it in any fashion as you would see fit. And this would be action requested if you choose to move to do so.
I'll make I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 3965, amending Chapter 11 of the City of Hayes, Kansas Municipal Code by modifying Article 11, Division 2, Section 11 through 42 regarding the International Residential Building Code.
There's a motion and a second on the ordinance change. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
I'll move we approve ordinance number 3966, amending Chapter 11 of the City of Hayes, Kansas Municipal Code by modifying Article 5, Division 1, Section 11-310 regarding the National Electrical Code.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Yes. On all of these, Jesse, I look at this a little bit like seatbelts. All cars have seatbelts in them, and some people prefer not to use them, others do. So any of this, people can still go ahead and hardwire their fire detectors. They can put in ARC if they would desire, but we're just not calling it mandatory. Everything has a risk. There's a risk for not doing it. It doesn't say, and it doesn't necessarily mean just because you do it that something can't malfunction and you still have a problem. So, and with the cost, I think these are no-brainers for us that we need to pass this.
I would agree, and I actually want to applaud the contractors that brought it up to you, and you listened to them. When we passed this, we said we would listen. You know, these guys are the ones in the business. They know a lot more than we do. I mean, we went through that for many, many weeks, but it's obviously some of the stuff just didn't stand out. So I think it's the right thing to do, and I definitely appreciate them bringing it up to us.
Over the vote, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you.
Next item is the 2020 budget public hearing. We're going to conduct a public hearing for the approval of the 2020 budget. Opening the public hearing now. Would anyone from the audience like to address the commission about the 2020 city budget? Is there a motion to close the public hearing for the 2020 budget?
So moved.
Second? Okay. There's a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item is 2020 budget approval. Mr. Doherty.
Toby Doherty, City Manager. I would like to perform a short presentation on the 2020 budget. I want to start off with the goals and highlights that we try to achieve every year with the annual budget. One, we want the balance to be budget to be balanced. We want to keep the mill levy at 25. We have not added an employee since 2010, and we want to continue paying cash for large projects. A little about the general fund. The most notable item is that we are budgeting a sales tax increase over the 2019 budget of 2.9%. We've had a lot of flat years in sales tax, and we've seen a positive trend as of late, so this is a little bit helpful for us. City Commission is transferring $500,000 to Special Highway to help fund the street maintenance program, and $723,000 to Commission Capital Reserve, which is your savings account that you can use to pay cash for large projects. This does include the money recently received from Ellis County, the excess sales tax funds. Outside agencies, the City Commission has allocated $100,000 for Fort Hayes scholarships, $80,000 for $7,000 for Grow Hayes, and $168,000 for the Care Council. With regard to the levy funds, we did see an assessed valuation increase of 1.6%. That means one mill is worth $226,802. Mill levy has been at or below 25 for 13 out of 14 years. And it's the 7th lowest levy in Kansas, the lowest levy outside of Johnson County. With regard to the levy funds, the really most notable item on this is the reallocation of $0.5 to the airport. The airport has subsisted on a 1 mil levy for a lot of years, and we are outgrowing that 1 mil with the requirements that we have, both capital and operational requirements. Enterprise funds. Water production and distribution continues to be solvent. We are transferring $496,000 to capital improvement. Water reclamation and reuse. We have a wastewater payment on the new facility of $1.9 million, and we are transferring $660,000 to capital improvements. With regard to water and sewer, some of the most notable projects in the budget, we are budgeting $40,000 to improve the lab area, $80,000 for continued well rehabilitation. That project started this year. $150,000 for sewer line cleaning, and $100,000 for manhole rehabilitation. With regard to water conservation, $75,000 for outreach, $50,000 for toilet replacement. With regard to turf replacement and washing machine rebates, turf replacement, we're probably going to have to up the per square foot amount or up the amount to try to entice more people to participate in the program. And then we have been at $100 for a washing machine rebate since, I believe, 2007, when this first came up. And it's probably time to up that to $125 or $150 to try to get more people. Even though it's a very highly utilized program, I think in order to keep up with inflation, we should increase that a little bit. As I mentioned before, street maintenance program, we're budgeting $1.3 million for that. Does include the $500,000 transfer from the general fund. It's a little bit higher than normal because of the unspent funds from this year. If the commissioner remembers, we had a grinding project that wasn't awarded because the bid came in higher than we thought was something we should be spending money on. So that money will roll into next year's program. Stormwater, we are budgeting $100,000 for a master plan. The last master plan was completed in the 90s, and we have fulfilled the master plan. We've done all of the notable things that we're going to do, and it's time to put a new master plan in place, and one that marries dollars up with risk, and we think we can easily accommodate that. Couple small projects in stormwater. We are cleaning and inspecting the pipe under Gustad Drive that goes through the levee, and then the pool drain actually goes through the levee. The Hayes Aquatic Park actually goes through the levee, and we're lining that. Special parks, we are replacing the fence in Frontier Park, redoing a couple ball fields, replacing the fence in the railroad corridor. The most notable item in this budget is the creation of a 1.25 mile path that will start at the Hayes Recreation Commission and terminus at the Hayes Med Walking Trail off of 22nd Street. This plan is being designed right now. We'll be back in front of the commission, and hopefully it's going to be a good start for an east side system of multi-use paths throughout the city of Hayes. And we're also bringing back for later in the year more path connectivity on the east side and west side of town for the commission to consider. CVB, as usual, we're doing $60,000 for airport marketing. There is a one-time transfer of CVB reserve money to special parks. This allows the commission to keep making improvements in quality of life expenditures. Keep in mind, we are somewhat limited on what CVB, transient guest tax dollars, are able to be spent on, and quality of life improvements is one of them. We are planning on $25,000 for a market analytics consultant, and then you can see the funding allocated for the various outside agencies within CVB. Capital improvement plan, we have budgeted the first year of the North Vine corridor improvements. We are replacing the driving surface on Canal between 20th and 27th. This is much needed. It's an old concrete street that's had some panels replaced recently. They will actually not be replaced. It's only the older panels that will be replaced. We are doing the engineering for the 27th Street replacement between Hall and Fort. Water, the commission has approved the design contract for the redundant water line crossing and booster station. That project will go forward next year. And then we have a water line replacement on 6th Street. Stormwater, we are continuing the $75,000 for structure replacement, and we do have $50,000 for the Montgomery ditch lining. Montgomery ditch was poorly conceived for maintenance and erosion purposes. We've spent a lot of work down there trying to figure out the best way to take care of it and continue to prevent eroding. So this is a continuation of that project. It's too steep, yes. It's too steep, so it's really hard to maintain. You're going to see a slope mower here in a little while, which is a part of the reason for that. But and then just the way it was designed with some of the curves and the way the water flows, it's ripe for erosion. We've had to take out some of the grass and put in concrete. We did budget $4 million for design engineering on the R9 project, assuming we start moving through the transfer process in 2021. And we have some airport projects, lighting upgrades on the crosswind runway and repainting of the main runway. With regard to vehicles, it's a typical year for vehicles. We have some pickups, patrol vehicles, we have some mowers in Parks Department. CVB has a 10-year-old Prius they're replacing with a small SUV. They can better haul some of their stuff when they go to trade shows and things like that. The airport is purchasing a tractor mower and a snow blower. As mentioned, Commissioner Phelps, we are budgeting a slope mower in stormwater. This is a mower that's designed to mow steep slopes without risk to the operator of rollover. And the fire department is replacing a rescue pumper. This is a pumper that's a couple year past due, and we've got a good useful life out of it. And so, as a summary, your budget that you're considering tonight is balanced. The mill levy is not increasing again. You are continuing the paying cash for large projects, and we continue to focus on sustainability into the future. And I would stand for any questions.
I move we approve the 2020 budget for the City of Hayes.
Second. Any discussion?
Great budget.
It'd be interesting to know what kind of cost savings we've experienced. I know it'd be hard to figure out, but just take, for instance, our street program, and taking care of, just like you do vehicles, you have a certain time when you replace those. And I think extending the life of our streets and keeping up on that infrastructure, like with our sewer clean and everything, that's got to be saving us money in the long run. It's kind of one of those pay me now, pay me later. And I think by all the different areas that we do that continued maintenance and so forth, that's got to be a lot of money saved.
When the residents
And not
voted,
spent in an emergency.
2004, when the sales tax was voted, one of the promises made at that time was money received for street maintenance will be spent on street maintenance, and that the city commission would allocate more monies. And so then beginning in 2006, we went from having very little money, maybe $100,000 a year, to having over $1 million a year to spend on street maintenance. I can tell you, being around in 2006, our problem was where do we start? Because every street needed help. Now, as you drive around, our streets are in pretty good condition. There's always maintenance that can be done, but it's not overwhelming like that. We're ahead of the curve right now. Now, I'm not sure what that quantifies to as far as the savings, but we're in a lot better shape than we were 15 years ago.
Also today, it just stuns me that in other communities they don't have it. We have this unique thing called two guys in a truck. I mean, you go to all these towns that have potholes, and they don't do anything. And two gentlemen this morning were driving around in a truck, and they were putting asphalt in potholes. It's a temporary measure. We get, as you said, we're very proactive. We're addressing these before those potholes get bigger. And I don't know how we invented this, and nobody else did, but the chip sealing, the crack sealing, all that, as you said, it makes the service last longer, and it costs us less in the long run.
I don't know what it was this year, but a couple years ago, I read an article that Chicago, I believe, has $8 million in their budget for potholes. I mean, it's not overlays or, we do pretty major projects for $8 million. They do a city like that, $8 million just some potholes, but your taxpayer expects it.
At the risk of repeating myself, I just want to congratulate staff and Toby for a great job you guys do on this budget. It makes life really easy. Feels good. Walk away kind of proud when we approve.
I actually should, since it's a televised meeting, I want to give Kim Rupp, Finance Director, credit. The budget is his baby to put together and get to me in raw form, and then meet with department heads and sort of congeal it into something that we feel you guys be palatable, and you guys finish molding it before it gets passed. But Kim does a lot of the heavy lifting.
And
so
we
kudos to
appreciate
them.
you, Kim.
I appreciate every employee, I mean, as long as we're appreciating people, because employees now have, and we didn't have this before, buy into the budget, whether it's their healthcare program or finding some savings. Most of this is possible, particularly in recent years as sales tax dollars have dropped. They're finding savings, and so we're able to carry those forward and fund future budgets. So I really appreciate the work that everyone in the city does to make this happen.
Agreed.
I think another thing is that being able to keep our mill levy at 25, and actually it's 18 for the city, 7 pass through for the library, but to be able to keep that for 13 out of the last 14 years, I think that's a tremendous feat right there. And once again, city staff as well as department heads and all of our workers, it takes everybody pulling together in order for us to be able to do that for 13 of the last 14 years. And most residents are looking at their streets as they're driving, and most of them are much improved from where they were. And the other thing they look at is that final mill levy, what their taxes are doing, and we're doing the best that I believe we can do, and thank you, city staff.
Prior to serving on the commission, I did never really think about the mill levy, I'm embarrassed to say. But serving now, I'm looking at everybody's mill levy throughout the state, and it even makes you more proud.
It does, and, you know, it's proud to be part of this budget process, and, you know, you guys talking about streets, and, you know, many times I'll be driving around, or residents says, man, you know, got a pothole here, and, you know, I'll call Toby or whoever, and it's usually fixed within either that day, and, I mean, that's pretty proud to be part of that process, and it's because of the way it's ran, and, you know, we have the money in the bank to be able to do that, so thank you guys for what you do.
I might point out, we've got well over 200 miles of street in Hayes, so our crews can't, you know, spot every one of them, and
No.
it's up to the public, you know, to bring
Yeah.
it forth. Late Dan Rupp used to say a lot of people have a pothole. Instead of calling somebody and telling them about it, they seethe. They seethe over it.
Seethe.
And I found out over the years, somebody will tell me about that. I said, well, have you, you know, years ago with the trash cans, somebody go, the damn trash cans all beat up. I said, well, call the service department and, you know, get it replaced. So there's a rapid response, I think, in all our departments when somebody has an issue.
Call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 2020 budget is approved. That would have been interesting. Toby, do you have anything else you'd like to add tonight?
I do not.
Commissioner Phelps?
I do not have anything other than to echo everybody's words about our staff getting this budget together the way they did. Great job.
Commissioner Melick?
Maybe a little update from Toby or Mr. Crispin on the sewer line break on the bypass. Where are we at on that?
Good evening, Commissioners. Jeff Crispin, Director of Water Resources. I've actually been out of town for a couple days, so I was hoping to get an update this evening before I got here. But we had the situation with the sewer line break. We had the pipe installed. We were waiting for a couple of air releases. Basically, the material that we installed is not your normal PVC material. It had to be fused on site. So if you were out there or you saw in the news, there were long sticks of this HDPE pipe that the contractor would fuse together. A little bit different process. So they pulled that through, and we had to source some of the parts that are not on the shelf typically. So that caused us some issues. But when we had it installed, everything was installed. It's been working just fine. We are meeting all the regulations and everything's flowing just fine. We just had a couple of air releases we needed to install and then put everything back together. So it's taken a little bit longer than I would hope, but we are getting there. So,
But there's been no disruption to anybody?
no disruption of service. I had that question quite a bit. We had no disruption. We took some efforts. Staff, again, you've been talking about staff. Our staff at the wastewater treatment plant and our other staff within our department and other departments have done well. We work together to make those things happen. But it's never an easy thing. But I think we reacted very well in that situation. And hopefully it doesn't happen again, but you never know.
We have aging infrastructure.
Yeah, and that's why you want to make sure that, just as you mentioned, Commissioner, we do sewer line cleaning. We're getting ready to have our sewer line cleaning start this next week for 2019, and that's very important that we continue that process.
I would add that M&D was very quick to respond on this, and then the company that we got the generator, the pumps and the overland pipe.
Yeah, just to add to that, Toby, the M&D of Hayes, we contacted them immediately for emergency work due to the depths. Sometimes some of those things are out of our scope because of our equipment might be not as beefy as theirs, but they responded very well, helped us out quite a bit. Quickly, we decided that at a lift station, you may be pumping out of a lift station, and if when that lift station cannot serve the wastewater down the line, you have to manually pump it out. So you could pump for 14 hours in a day and continue to pump and pump and pump. And we did that for a couple days, but our superintendent, Jason Regal, he had a great idea of contacting the company that provided pumps when we were going through some of the updates at the wastewater treatment plant to do some bypassing. And it also goes without saying that KDHE, we worked well with KDHE, and they helped us out quite a bit, KDOT. So a lot of things came together. Like I said, it's taken a little bit longer to finish than I would like, but everything is operating properly, and we're trying to wrap that up hopefully in the next few days.
Great.
Any other questions?
Mr. Jacobs?
Last evening, I don't know if anybody else attended, but I attended the Big Brother Big Sister Duck Derby at the water park. Never ceases to amaze me how many people enjoy and how much fun they have. So many people stopped me last evening and talked about the new water feature. We really have a wonderful facility, and it's really kept up well, and I appreciate that from staff, but I appreciate all the decisions made before me and upgrading that, because it's a wonderful facility.
I just want to reiterate what you brought up last week about the half-price pool passes for Ellis. I mean, I know you don't need a pat on the back, but you should get it. I've had many people stop me and say, great job, guys. Toby, the rec, make sure it happened. I know it's a very short amount of time, but like you said last week, they are part of our community. They're only a few miles away, and it just kind of almost gives you goosebumps when you have people talk to you about stuff like that. So, great job.
Nothing, executive session? We're adjourned.